Do you think the Dolphins test anything on this conversation with Tua, or this thing gets done with a 5 in a spot that everyone's comfortable with? I know I'm asking you to crystal ball it, but go for it, Tom.
Well, I would say that the Dolphins have been trying, and I know his agent was in Miami during the minicamp or leading up to the minicamp, so it seemed like maybe there was a pathway forward to get a deal done. They weren't able to do that at that time, but the Dolphins have been very committed to let's sign up Tua Tagovailoa as our long-term quarterback. I think that it's the part of this that we sometimes lose is the human aspect of things, and when you remember everything that Tua has been through in his life, in his career last year, or go back 2 years ago, and the world wanted Tua Tagovailoa to retire, regardless of how many concussions he actually had, regardless of what happened in Miami, what happened in Cincinnati, all that stuff, what it looked like on the field. We all have those images still in our heads, but there was this massive push for people who were not totally familiar with Tua Tagovailoa's medical history and were not Tua or his people or the Dolphins, who were saying he can't play again. This guy should never be on the field again. It's irresponsible. And then Tua gets back out there last offseason. He takes jiu-jitsu lessons, learns to fall better, plays every game. Last season, it was not just the concussion issues, but he had a variety of things that he went through in the early portion of his career. Last year was the healthiest he's played, and he played at a high level, although the Dolphins, much like the Jaguars, didn't play their best at the end of the season with some injuries to guys like Waddle and Mostert at the skill spots that impacted them. So now if you don't pay Tua Tagovailoa, when his press conference a couple of weeks ago, he made abundantly clear that he's up to speed on the on the dynamics of the conversation. He has gotten updates. He thinks a lot of progress has been made. If all of a sudden you get to a spot and, okay, let's say you play hardball, we're pulling the offer, you can play out the option year. Does that cause Tua to press? Does that cause him to maybe hold the ball longer and take more shots? I don't know. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not inside the meeting rooms knowing where the football is supposed to go. But by paying Tua Tagovailoa, by getting the deal done, you potentially, assuming health, which you can never assume, especially for somebody with a medical history, but as long as the guy stays healthy and continues to ascend, you've locked him in before the Dak Prescott deal's done, before some other quarterbacks potentially get paid, before that next group of guys, Brock Purdy and company, are up. You may end up with a better number at a time that the cap is going to continue to grow, and so you would assume that salaries are going to continue to skyrocket here. I think that you have to take into account Tua is a very unique situation for a lot of different reasons here. The Dolphins' actions have shown they want to get him done. To this point, though, they just haven't agreed on what that number is. And that number after the Lawrence deal probably moves a little bit, especially from the agent's perspective.
If you're willing to share, Tom, before we move on, the unnamed general manager that you spoke to this morning that would counsel the Dolphins to let Tua play it out, was health the reason why the general manager has that theory, or is it something else?
No, it was just sheer economics. It was, the first question was, why did the Jaguars do that deal at 55? With Trevor Lawrence. And then if you're Tua and now the baseline is 56 or 55.1 or whatever, his point was just let him play it out. In other words, given the history with Tua, not because of that, but just given his history, but also the fact that the numbers are so bonkers here, you have him under franchise tags for the next couple of years. And yeah, that can get ugly. And it's a road that most teams don't want to go down with their quarterback. But, your worst case scenario then is you have him this year on the option, and then you tag him twice. And again, it might get ugly and all those sorts of things, but it's 3 years where you don't have to lock up 20+% of your salary cap for the long haul. You can continue to go year to year. And these are the things that every GM in the league has to figure out with their high paid players. I mean, think about the Vikings with Justin Jefferson. I mean, $35 million per year on that deal blew the wide receiver market completely out of the water, especially when you chop off the fake years on, the Tyreek Hill deal and the Devontae Adams deal. But what are you paying for Justin Jefferson? Well, you're paying for not having to deal with a potential holdout, a high-profile standoff that leads every TV show with a guy who's in every commercial. He's the face of your organization. He's the face of the state. And you're paying for all those things. You're paying for the gritty and all those things. Tua's in a little bit different situation here, but imagine, Rich, if we're having this conversation every week for the next 3 years about Tua Tagovailoa, there is some residual impact of that. It's not the reason that you do a deal. You do a deal because you believe that this guy can really get that much better and he can be the one who can lead you to Super Bowls here. But the human aspect is also part of it here. The hardliner, it's a lot easier for a GM who's not with the team to say, I wouldn't pay the guy. I don't think he's that good. I don't think it's going to be worth it. I wouldn't tie up 20+% of my salary cap in him when you got all these other guys to pay. It's another thing to say, okay, well, if we go down that road and it gets ugly with Tua, and then a couple years from now, we don't have a quarterback at all, what do we do? That's a different type of math when it's actually your job on the line.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.